Welcome back to the Impact Driven Leader podcast. This is your host, Tyler Dickerhuff. Man, I'm excited for you to be here today. I'm excited for you to be listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for being a subscriber to the YouTube channel, checking out all these live conversations, these interviews. Today, man, I have a special treat. One, it's a conversation that Mick and I, today's guest, Mick Spiers, we decided to do this as a tandem podcast. I have done, back and forth podcasts in the past. And what I found is that, the conversation just kind of got a little disjointed between the two. Either one had, way more layers because the relationship with each other, the proximity. And so I decided, hey, Mick, instead of you interviewing for me for your podcast, me interviewing you for your podcast, let's just have this conversation together because honestly, I think that's when the best conversations have. So get ready to listen to that. But let me tell you a little bit more about Mick. Mick is the author of the book, Your Leader, Now What? He has a 30-year history in defense aerospace, and then into public transit. He worked for an organization, built some software that is integral in public transportation throughout the world. He lives in the Philippines from Australia. You'll hear in our conversation that, spent time professionally in Australia, New Zealand. We talk a lot about Auckland in that, but as well, we dig deep into really this ethos of modern day leadership. What does it look like? How can you as a leader be empowered and feel empowered in some great tactical tools that Mick shares for you to be able to use? I'm thankful that you're here listening, and I'm thankful that you're part of the audience of the Impact Driven Leader podcast, the community. I'm thankful for those of you that are part of the Roundtable listening in the book club. There is an opportunity for you to join either the book club or the Roundtable. We're going to be starting a new cohort group very soon. Excited for that. If you're interested in that, just send me an email, click on the link in the show notes, and make sure to get you directed to where we can have a conversation, what it looks like to be a part of the Roundtable. I know that people have gotten tremendous value. I get a lot of value out of the conversations we have, and I'd love to just share that with you, what that looks like. So get ready, take some notes. If you're subscribed, if somebody shared this with you, make sure you subscribe so you get to the next episode. But here's my guest, Mick Spiers. Mick, so excited to be having this conversation with you. Man, I'm excited for this layout. This is something unique to both of us. I have not released a podcast where it's just an open conversation that's going to be released on two podcast shows, your podcast, my podcast, Impact Driven Leader. You're going to talk about yours. But man, I'm excited about the conversation because as we got to meet each other, we're talking about it's like, oh, I think we're along the same pathway, but with such different flavor that this is going to make it a lot of fun to have this conversation.
Yeah, I can't wait, Tyler. This is going to be awesome. So I'm going to be playing this on the Leadership Project podcast as well. I've also never done this. So for everyone listening at home, we were going to interview each other. I was going to have Tyler on my show and Tyler was going to have me on his show. We thought it might be more authentic for us to just share a wonderful conversation with you. So we're going to record it once and then share it with you twice on both of those platforms, and really looking forward to see where the conversation goes today.
I appreciate you being willing to. The listeners of the Impact Driven Leader podcast, my style is very conversational. As I tell guests, it's like we're sitting down at a coffee shop. We're just having a coffee, a tea, whatever that may be, and talking about this subject, leadership. And it really I'm going to use that as a kickoff because to me, that's where I'm most comfortable to have those conversations. And one of the subjects that I know we've talked a little bit about, we talked about just pre-record about one of your guests, Jeff Bloomfield, who's had a tremendous impact on you. It's the kind of this theory and this idea, this understanding that when people feel safe, they will do anything. When they feel safe, you get better results rather than forced. And to me, when I'm talking, to a guest, when I'm talking to other guests, and I want to get the best, like the deepest, not the canned answers. I want them to feel safe. And so that's kind of my directive. And so I want to kick off there and say, kind of in your history, a little bit, bring in your background so the audience can hear that. Where do you think that pivot point, that understanding of safety really kind of finds an entry point?
Oh, yeah, that's a tough question. So if you think about...
Off we go.
Okay, so think about my long-term history. I started in the military, and military was all about instinctive obedience. I learnt a lot there. And when you unpack your history when you're in the military and military leadership, and a lot of it's very directive and authoritative and all this kind of stuff. But the ones that rise to the top and are exceptional leaders, even in the military, are the ones that take the time to take a genuine interest in the people around them and provide for them. To quote Simon Sinek for a moment, it's not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. And those ones that make that pivot are the ones that always rise to the top, even in a very instinctive, obedient environment like the military. So I spend 8 years in the Army. I spent 5 years in the public service in defence aerospace area before, the rest is history, as they say, and off into the corporate world. But the lessons that keep on emerging for me are all about human beings. They're all about emotion. And I'm so glad that you brought up Jeff. He's been a huge influence in me. In fact, I stumbled across Jeff on a LinkedIn learning session 38,000 or 36,000 feet in the air on a plane, and I watched his LinkedIn learning multiple times. It had such an impact on me to start thinking about how people make decisions and how they get motivated into action. So he's one of them. William Glass is another one around his work on choice theory, and I've got to say Martin Seligman is another huge one. So these different moments in my career where I've read something and you kind of know it to be true. I'm sure you've had this before, Tyler. You kind of know it to be true, but then someone codifies it for you in a way where these light bulbs just go off and you go, this is it. This is the answer to leadership. It's not about telling people what to do. It's about inspiring people into meaningful action around a worthy cause and getting them to do something because they want to do it, not because you told them to do it. And when they want to do it, they knock it out of the park.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they're told to do it, they do the bare minimum to make sure they don't get fired. That's leadership. So create that environment where their unique gifts can flourish. Give them an environment where they have some level of choice of how they do what they do, and then, let them thrive. Let them knock it out of the park because they want to do it.
So would you say from your experience in the Army that was always the case, or that wasn't the case? You found yourself yearning for more of that, being inspired? You kind of described it as instructive obedience, but, kind of help me, in the rest of the audiences as we're listening to this, say, hey, where did this really set in and be like, man, there's got to be a better way?
Yeah, it did come later in my career for me to realize why, but I'm able to go back and unpack all of those leaders that I've had in my career and realize which ones had the secret sauce and which ones didn't. And once again, in the military, people will do what you tell them to do. There's the power dynamics and all that kind of stuff. But they will either do it dragging their feet, or they'll do it with the most amazing energy that you've ever seen. And the secret between those two is motivation, care, love, respect. And when you set that and you are inspirational and you inspire people into action because they want to do it, they will run up that hill with all of their energy and all of their might. Whether that's and I was in a technical field in the Army, but we still carried guns and all of those things.
Yeah.
So when you've inspired someone, they will put their heart and soul into it. When they're doing it because you told them, they'll drag their feet and they'll get up there and they'll, maybe even on the outside, it'll look like they're putting in a lot of effort, but on the inside, their heart's not in it, right? Which
is many workplaces in our world today, right?
Yeah.
As we look at it today, and we're recording this July of 2022, we're going through this transitionary phase of, do I want to be here in this job, or am I just showing up to get a paycheck? And people are voting with their attendance and their compliance based upon their safety level. How safe do they feel? How comfortable? What's the trust level every single day? And it's our opportunity as leaders to say, are we recognizing that? Or are we saying, hey, we'll just force them and use instructive obedience to move ahead?
Yeah. So, and then coming to your question, the moments probably come, much later in my career. I'm going to say that there was another big moment in my career when I left Auckland. I'd been working in Auckland for a period of time, and I moved back to Sydney at that moment. And I'd realised at that point that my leadership for the past 2.5, 3, in fact, it was more like 3.5 years. For the 3.5 years I was in Auckland, my leadership was very much lead from the front and hands on everything. And I had my fingers in everything. And I was the one that was doing presentations to customers. And I was the one that was engaging with the team in France. And a lot was sitting at my desk. And yet I had this amazing, capable team around me that I was not engaging and empowering. They were having a good time, and we had a very successful project. I wasn't an ogre, but I was very directive and I was very hands-on. So I moved to Sydney at that point, and less than 1 month later, I had to move back to Auckland because I discovered that in my leadership style, I hadn't brought everyone else along for the journey for me. So I couldn't move on to my next role because when I left a vacuum behind me. Not a vacuum of skill or anything like that. They knew they were a very talented team, but a vacuum created because I was too hands-on and I was too directive that when I left, they didn't know how to step into that breach, including the customer felt unsettled because the person that they had spoken to every day for 3.5 years was no longer there, right? So that was probably the biggest moment when I went back to Auckland and I completely changed gears. I went almost 100% servant leadership, if you like, and everything I did was about nurturing and encouraging those around me. And here's the key point. When they then started knocking out of the park without me opening my mouth, that was when the joy and fulfillment came. It was like, I was proud of what I did on the project, but now all of a sudden the joy and fulfillment was 10 times the personal pride of my own work. To watch the team gel together and do it without me was just so amazing. And I've changed my leadership style ever since.
So was there a catalyst in that, or you just realized, it wasn't working, I got to fix this, so I got to fix it somehow, when you moved from Sydney back to Auckland?
Yeah, it was that look around. It was a look around at the faces and realizing, hang on a second, I've got this amazing team here that I didn't provide the right environment for, that I didn't nurture. I didn't give them the opportunities that where they could grow, where they could knock it out of the park. It was actually the look on their faces to go, oh yeah, I created this. This was me. So I better fix it. And then when I did fix it and I saw the results of pivoting and taking a different approach, that changed me forever. And now every role I've ever done since, yes, I provide the inspiration, I provide the vision, I provide the purpose, I declare the values and beliefs, I build a culture, but I go into more coach mode and I ask more questions. So instead of coming into a meeting and go, right team, this is our number one priority for this week, I'll start with the question, hey team, what do you think our number one priority is this week? And then the answers start coming and you go, yeah. And what do you think? What do you think will be the positive impact if we're able to achieve this? And what do you think the challenges are? So turning into coach mode as leader changed my life. And on top of that, the things that you spoke about before with Jeff, doing it with purpose, doing it with intent, but doing it through emotion. These were the key moments in my career, and I've never looked back since.
I think go ahead. Yeah.
I want to know from you, what was the moment in your career where you went, okay, there's got to be a better way?
For me, that was a point where I was trying to figure out, how can I make a bigger impact? What can I do to, really feel more engaged and like I had value? And a lot of that for me was, coming back, and I'm going to tie this in to where we just left in that conversation, because I think so often, and this happened to me and this can happen to other leaders, that we think our tasks are what brings us value. And you had the opportunity where you left Auckland, you go to Sydney, and you got to see from afar, it's like, oh, this is not good. Oh, this is not going, your customers saying, we're not happy. You have your team probably being a little bit like, what do we do? right? We're a little bit lost because that baton wasn't passed, that empowerment wasn't done. And I found myself in a place to where I don't want to be a sole, entrepreneur. I don't want to be just a one-man alone on an island. I don't want to be a one-man band. I don't like that. And there's a lot of people that think, oh, that's fortuitous. Henry Ford was that example. It's like, I am the guy with everything. Everyone else is just my helper. And as he found out, and Ford organization found out, corporation, that doesn't work well very long, I had experienced that too, because what you said, it wasn't very fulfilling. And so I found myself in this place to say, I'd gone through a couple different changes in my careers, different things, but along the same, kind of idea of this consulting, this, helping. Didn't fully understand the coaching model, but I loved coaching. I loved helping. And I found myself understanding what's the barrier. And the barrier was my insecurity. And it's just like when I go back to the situation, yes, you moved, you left from Auckland, you go to Sydney, and that forced you, there was a catalyst there. It's like, I got to do something different here. And a lot of leaders, I don't think, are ever in that place. They maybe get promoted, but they're close enough to where they can have their fingers in the pot, where they still keep doing their thing, and they're like, oh, that's what value I bring. I'm irreplaceable. And to me, that's, for many, many leaders, that is a armor of their insecurity, because if I was vulnerable enough to say, no, I'm not the best at this. Mick is better at this than I am. Hey, Mick, can you do this for us? And there's this fear that if I do that, I'm not empowering a leader. I'm disempowering myself, and now I'm replaceable. And, that's something that I wrestled with, especially as a individual consultant, is, I'm going out there, I'm trying to work with people, and I can have my niche, what I'm good at, but if I can't do everything they need, unless I have the team with me, if I'm just the one man to do this, well, then I'm replaceable. And so I had to wrestle through that and becoming, into a larger organization, say, hey, what value can I bring? I had to understand and learn that I had to focus more on what others were trying to accomplish, and not just how do I keep moving ahead and making sure that I provide value. And so that whole concept and that understanding centered around my insecurities and recognizing them when they showed up. And that was creating a lack of trust or a lack of safety in others around me. And I had to learn to deal with that. And I had to say, ooh, this is a problem. This is a problem because I'm not helping others. I'm not able to do as what you did, go into that situation and start asking the right questions in a comforting way. It was more of, all right, here's the problem. Let's, put our head down and push and get it done. Because that's how, with my intensity, I was able to move the ball forward rather than just ask questions, be a part of the team. So that was kind of my personal experience in that mixing pot of this emotional leadership turmoil to say, how do I do it better?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that so openly, Tyler. I'd love to unpack it just a little bit for a while. So first of all, I think there's a lot of leaders out there that are exactly like that. They tie their identity, they tie their self-worth to what they do, not who they are. And when they go on a journey of discovery, discover who they are and what their genuine superpower is, they can then pivot and get the comfort from doing the leadership work. So getting the pride and the joy that they want from leading others instead of being impactful individually. And I know you're a big fan of John C. Maxwell, as I am, and one of his favourite sayings, which is an African proverb, is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that is, your podcast is all about impact, an impact-driven leader. Leaders are only ever given 24 hours a day just like everyone else. But if you're able to multiply your impact through those around you and to generate value from their gifts, then you've multiplied your impact far more than anything you could have done with your own pen in your hand, your own keyboard at your fingers, whatever the case may be. You're now multiplying and multiplying and multiplying through your influence and the environment that you're creating around you. And being self-aware enough, you said about there's someone else on my team that's actually better at this than me. Be comfortable with that. It's that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength for you to be able to say, I'm not the best person in the team to do this, but Jim is or Sally is, and let them shine. Yeah, good one, Tyler.
I think, is one of the things that I often reflect to, and it's a part of our fabric in human culture in many, many different locations and cultures and, geographies, and that's sport. Now, that sport can be in the way of actual sport. It could be, cricket, native, rugby, those sports that are, native to Australia, New Zealand. It could be, football. It could be basketball. It doesn't matter. It could be, whatever type sport that your culture is centric to. But it also can be in a family. Family's a team, and there's teamwork there. And if I look then to the corporate world, if we look at the team in our corporate world, and it gets real muddy. It gets real muddy because we're not sure in a lot of organizations what our roles are because everyone is in sales. And so Directive in sales is go make as many sales as you can make. And then maybe you're in, billing, you're in IT or whatever else, and your job is to support all the salespeople. It's kind of like this if you're in a soccer team. And you're like, hey, our premier player is our striker. It's the guy at the top of the field. He usually scores the most goals. The rest of us don't matter. It's all about him. If the team goes with that approach, they're not going to have success. And yet that's what we do corporately. That's what we do in a lot of times in a family. And we have this one person who is just the rainmaker. And often then they get promoted to that next level, which is leadership. And yet we don't have this comprehension understanding. Their roles are uniquely and decidedly different. And, that's where I really take the opportunity and I look at it. Being a leader has nothing to do with being the star performer. Sometimes great leaders were star performers. A lot of times they weren't. It was the person on the team who you never really noticed sometimes. And sometimes they weren't glaring where they were like this over, performer, yet they never underperformed. And then you realize and you start understanding that everyone that's around them in their little circle, they just kind of perform a little bit better. And you start to see, they're a little bit better. There's a quote from the Hall of Fame, the perennial, I would say master of the sport, and that is Wayne Gretzky. And he said to hockey players, and they said, it's not the best players that play in the NHL, the National Hockey League. It is the players that make everyone else around them better. And to me, that is the sign of a leader. It's a person that, they're not looking for those personal accolades sometimes where they're not focusing on how can I absolutely win because I have to win. They're more of saying, how can I get close to the finish line and then take the rest of my team and push them across it? What can we do to say, hey, Mick, I'm really good at this. You're really good at that. If I help you do what, if I do what I do and you do what you do, man, we're both going to do better. What can we do in those situations? And that's where I see, coaches that have started to understand the dynamics of teams and that effectiveness start to pinpoint it. And that happens in the corporate world. That happens in all levels of sports. And it takes that retraining to understand those are the best leaders. And sometimes they are the person scoring the most goals on the field. But they're also going back to the 4 other players who made that last play possible. Yeah. It's the pass before the pass before the pass. Hey, you had a great defensive stand. I was able to 4 passes later get the ball and score. Man, that's what made the difference. I was able to, you had a good entry call with this potential client. You built such rapport and trust. You knew exactly what their needs were that then you put it on to the next person that through our fulfillment capacity and we had all the right people in the right place that we were able to land this major client. But it was because of that first person who talked to him on the phone and then identified and built that rapport and that trust initially. That's how we had success, not because I came in at the end and I'm so good that I closed the deal and I solved it. And I think those are the big changes that organizations have to wrestle with and have to pivot on in order to have more sustainable success. Or if it's not, it's just a bunch of, rabbits. The hare and the turtle, where it's like the rabbit goes and the rabbit goes, the hare goes, the hare goes. And the turtle's like, hey, I'm just doing my thing here. Just doing my thing here. I'm just going to keep doing my thing here. And if we focus on that as a team, that's when you go far. It's not about fast, it's go far.
Yeah, brilliant, Tyler. And there's a lot to unpack there, but some of the key ones. And there is a dichotomy here. And to be fair to a lot of organisations out there, it is challenging to do what we're about to say. But those individual superstars that knock it out of the park, they are the ones that become very visible. And that's how they end up getting tapped on the shoulder and put into a leadership role. But if you're the best software engineer in the company, it does not necessarily mean you're going to be the best leader. In fact, it could be the exact opposite. You might be better served being the best software engineer in the company, because what got you to where you are today will not get you to where you need to be as a leader. And it's a mindset shift that needs to change. And what happens is you get these people promoted who were the best software engineer in the company, and now they're in this leadership role. They've never been shown what it means to be a leader, to be fair to them. They do a poor job. They start getting frustrated with themselves. They don't enjoy leadership sometimes. And now you've got a double whammy. The company has got a poor leader in a pivotal role, and they've lost their best software engineer. Mm-hmm. Right? And then some of the human nature kicks in, and you get people saying, I feel like I'm doing two jobs. And it's part of it is they are doing two jobs. And part of it is they're reaching back into their comfort zone, and they're still doing parts of their old job because they liked it and they were good at it, and they're struggling with their new job. Yeah. The other part that I loved of what you're saying is about the co-creation. And one of the problems that we have in the organization is you get the culture. You get the culture that you celebrate, that you honor, that you reward, and that you tolerate. Tolerate's maybe a different topic for another conversation, but you get that behavior. And if all you're doing is applauding and clapping the individual that put the ball in the net at the end, and you're forgetting about the three people that did the lead-up play, then you're going to shift the culture, and everything's going to be about getting the ball, getting that only that one person, right? So, you need to celebrate everyone that led to the success. And your sales example is perfect. Yeah. There are people that are very good at account management and setting up the account that are terrible at closing the deal. And there are other people that are really good at closing the deal, but celebrate both of them. Yeah. And I use some work here from Otto Scharmer. He uses this wonderful analogy around a orchestra. Right, so a violin player, sitting down and listening to a violin player is beautiful, and a violin, there's something special about it. A string quartet, this is something new again. It's kind of richer an environment. Then the string quartet gets into a mini orchestra, and oh wow, something just shifted, and this is amazing. And now into a full orchestra, and you've got this amazing thing where all of the sum of the parts adds up to something much greater than the individuals could ever create by themselves. And the conductor is the one that, quite often conductors are talented musicians themselves, but they're not playing an instrument, are they? But they're drawing out the best of every part of that orchestra to create this new magical thing that would not have existed without bringing it together. So co-creation, holding space so that all of those natural gifts of every member of the orchestra can play to their full capacity and their full talent, but bringing it together to something that's magical and beyond the sum of its parts.
I think one of the great challenges as we stop and we think about this, and I think about your charge in the leadership project, and in helping new leaders, and that's really what the impact-driven leader is about too, is empowering ill-equipped these Gen X millennial leaders who maybe haven't had a great example of leadership before them. A leadership model that was very authoritarian, or just do it because I told you, or it's very wishy-washy where there's lack of accountability because they're like, well, I don't want to hold your feet to the fire. You might leave, which brings up its own problems. I think we find ourselves into this place where we have a lot of experienced leaders and they've fallen into a set of bad habits. And we have these inexperienced leaders where they're going in and they're doing a lot of things we've talked about earlier, but then they start looking around and saying, well, what does it mean to be a leader? And we have in our society today, it's a global world. It's no longer these pockets in Europe, in Asia, in the Australian continent, including New Zealand and North America and all these different pockets. It's not. It's really a global world. And the pandemic of 2020, 2021 proved that even greater. Because now you have people that live all over the world and they work in many different places all over the world. And so everything's now intertwined and connected. And we have this feeling to say, hey, what should a leader be doing? Do we need to come in and we just need to appease people and say, hey, show up whenever you can, do whatever you can? Or is there accountability to where we're going to be directive and we're going to take the right actions? And that may be polarizing in itself. But the actions I'm coming to take are actually to bring us all together and say, hey, we have this vision. I want to make sure that we're moving towards that. And if you're in, great. I'm in with you too. And if you're not, okay, great. Where can you go find a place? Because here isn't the place. But one of the things to step back, all right, that's the whole piece of the pie, and to cut it up into little slices, is identifying and understand if I'm an experienced leader. What are the things I've been doing that I need to stop doing? What are some of those things that you've seen that leaders right now are challenged with that they really need to say, hey, I don't know if you should be doing that anymore, or look at it with new eyes. Maybe some of this is the way we've always done it. What things have you seen there? Yeah,
all right. So in defense of the new leader, right? So they're often thrown into these leadership roles where no one has taken the time to show them what true leadership looks like. So their only reference point is to look around at leaders around them. And unfortunately, that's a very hit and miss affair, because we've got a lot of not purposely horrible bosses, but we've got a lot of horrible bosses out there that have got no self-awareness that their actions are impacting the emotions of the people around them, right? So they start going, oh, okay, well, that's what that person did. That's what this person did. And they start mimicking those behaviors. So take the time to stop and really reflect on what good leadership has felt like for you. And everyone's had a mixed bag. They've had that, okay, here's a leader that, and there's no such thing as a perfect leader, by the way. So it's picking and choosing different attributes. So look at the leaders that you've had before and think about what worked and what didn't work. And then as you practice your own leadership, practice daily self-reflection. Be self-aware and self-reflect every day to go, okay, what went well today? What didn't go well today? What would I do differently next time if I had the chance to do a similar thing again? What did I learn about myself today? What did I learn about others? And every day you can become a better leader by paying attention to what's working and what's not working. And human beings are complex. So what works for one person may not work for another person. And by the way, to rub salt into the wound, what works for that one person 2 weeks from now might not work for them anymore, because they will be growing and they will have different emotional states at different times. So a leader is very in tune to their environment, very emotionally aware of themselves and those around them, and they're learning every day. One of my favorite quotes that one of my podcast guests shared with me recently, and I need to find out who originally said this because they couldn't remember either, was, next year I hope you have a better leader, and I hope that leader is me. That's where you need to get to. If you want to become a great leader, it's about paying attention and learning every day about what's working and what's not working. Then in terms of what you were saying about the accountability, this is really key, because I teach choice theory, and I talk about freedom of choice and freedom from oppression. This is all work from William Glasser. And I often get comments, well, but if we just leave everyone up to their own devices, it'll be chaos. People will just, if you give them a blank sheet of paper every day, there'll be no direction, there'll be no accountability. So yes, that's true. So the leader's role is to be able to paint that vision of the future, inspire people into meaningful action around that vision. So there is a North Star that everyone is heading towards. A great leader is also able to espouse their values and beliefs so that they can then start surrounding themselves with people that believe in the things that they believe. So people that believe in the cause. And once you've got people that believe in the cause, the battle's almost half won, Tyler, to tell the truth, right?
Yeah.
So you're painting that North Star. And the North Star might be something very visionary, or it might be very tactical about this week. Right, team, the most important thing by the end of this week is we need to do this. But instead of telling people what to do, then embrace freedom of choice. And remember that you attracted talented people around you. They know more things than you do. So tap into those gifts, tap into those talents. So set the direction and go, this is where we need to get to. Now, team, what do you think is the best way to get there? And then let them shine. You're paying them good money for their intellectual capability, not for their arms and legs. You're paying for their intellectual capability. So
I'd even go deeper with that.
Yeah, go.
To step in and say, the problem is, if you don't encourage them to find out their way, you go right back to where you were when you left Auckland and go to Sydney and have to come back.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
now you haven't created where they're starting to think through it. Because the best position that leader can be in, and into this quote, next year I hope to have a better leader, and I hope it's me. Well, I'd even go, next year I hope you have a better leader, and I hope it's you. I hope it's you who have grown, because if now you've replaced me, well, that's the ultimate goal, right? If you go back to that sitting in Auckland, you're like, man, if I went into this and then said, I'm going to be out of here in 2.5 years, who can I have replace me? Because I hope they push me out, where I have to be out.
That's brilliant. And that's wonderful growth for everyone then, right? So, yeah, absolutely. And then coming to this point of accountability. So you're creating an environment where they can think, and they can think for themselves, and they will enjoy that. They will enjoy that because everyone wants to feel like they're holding the steering wheel of their own life. So I have this acronym, TCA, in any of these meetings. Create an environment where everyone can think, and they get into a thinking state, a reflective state. That the thinking might also include a bit of visualization, where they can visualize the end result. But not only can they visualize the end result, they visualize the journey along the way and what might some of the potholes be that we need to avoid, some of the challenges, right? Then C is challenge. Once they've come up with a great way of doing it, challenge them, okay, what would better look like? What would best look like? What would 10% more look like? What do we need to do more of? What do we need to do less of? So challenge them a little bit. That is your job. It's not just to go, oh, yeah, well done, congratulations, off you go. Challenge them to be the best version of themselves so that they can knock it out of the park. And then A, in the TCA, A is action. But that's not you telling them the actions. It's getting them to say it. I have this saying, who's holding the pen? So in a meeting, give them the pen to summarize the actions. Because if that comes out of their mouth, they take extreme ownership of it.
Totally.
So you finish with, so what are you going to do about it? Oh, boss, I'm going to do this, and this. And what's stopping you from doing it? Nothing. Do you need any help? No, I've got everything I need to do. All right, let's go. And then the accountability comes in where you bring them in and say, okay, team, at the start of the week we said that we were going to head towards here. You said that the best way to get there was here. How did you go? Accountability. Hold them to account to the plan that they came up with. It was their plan. They took ownership of it. And you know what? You won't have to do too much for accountability because if they develop the plan, they'll put their heart and soul into it.
Well, it's self-loaded consequences. I mean, choices are, without a framework, choices just, anarchy, right? It's absolute chaos. But if you put together that framework, like the vision that you have, it's like, hey, this is the box that we're trying to accomplish. Whatever happens inside of that box, that's up to you. And if you're saying in the process of that, we need to expand our box, we need to change our box a little bit in order to meet our objective, then okay. But you're discovering that because you took ownership on the actions. And if midweek, you have that meeting on Monday, and midweek all of a sudden it's Tuesday, it's Wednesday, and someone's like, hey, Mick, we didn't see this. All of a sudden now we have to, make this pivot. You're like, well, okay, you're in the mix of it. I'm not the one to decide that. So go off and run with it. And eventually that's when they start to think a little differently. So then the next week you're like, hey, I learned from last week when we set in this way, but yet it didn't quite work out. We had to pivot. well, now I need to start thinking about that rather than as a leader. When I put that all on my shoulders, that I am sending out the work orders every single week and then getting frustrated because why aren't they being intuitive? Why aren't they thinking ahead? Why aren't we, helping with, inventory management to, customer service, to all those other factors that are part of your business? Well, because you haven't empowered them to, as you said, to think, to be reflective, to challenge, to, all right, wait a second. I remember this happened. Did we account for that? Yeah. This is what we're going to do account for. Awesome. Great. What are our actions? So as you said, to me, that makes an environment engaging to where with the right culture, meaning if everyone's empowered in that, everyone feels safe, meaning they know their place and their value. Every business in this world has the capacity to do that.
Yeah. Two magic things happen with those little pivots that you spoke about as well. When they're able to think for themselves and they're able to do those little pivots to go, oh, I hit a bump, but it's okay, I've got it. They start having that learning mindset themselves and they're growing every week. But the other thing that happens is the pride. At the end of the week, what do you feel most proud about, Tyler? Do you feel most proud about when you do a project and everything went perfectly to plan and at the end of the week you went, tick, great? Or do you feel more proud when you hit a bump on the road but you used your own methods or whatever to pivot around it and overcome it? That's when you feel proud. You feel proud at the end of the week where you go, I did it despite the challenges, not I did it and it was easy, right? So with those little pivots, they grow, they learn, and they feel really proud about what they achieved.
I think that's the key. Everyone, our entire being, in one way, shape, or form, is centered around learning. Our existence as humans is about learning. And if there isn't a fulfillment of either purpose or positive feeling by learning, we wouldn't exist. Because every single human had to learn in order to continue to exist. It's don't eat the poisonous plant. Don't step there. Don't touch that. I mean, to the simple little things that you and I do every day. And I think when that is a part of our culture, and when it's done in a safe way, to where it's not chastising the failure, it's not chastising the mistake, but say, what did we learn from that? Great. We know not what not to do. Hey, that's going to direct us closer to what to do. To me, there's a huge part of buy-in there. And as you said, it's when you get through that road bump, through that barrier, over that hurdle, and that ingenuity that comes with it, man, that just brings this entire spirit of we can do it.
Yeah.
And I think that feeling is so important that I don't think there's to me, that centers to the feeling of belief. And as a leader, I believe this, the number one superpower any person has in this world is belief. With it, they can do anything. Without it, they're not going to accomplish anything. And our great opportunity as leaders is to stoke that, to pour in more, to foster it, to recognize those opportunities. Mick, did you see what you did? Maybe you missed it. Man, that was brilliant. Man, keep doing that. That's great. And those little belief pieces, whether call a cheerleader as a leader, but man, what you're doing is you're creating this, going back to how I very, very first started. You're creating an entire layer of trust. Because if my leader is doing that, man, even if I mess up, I know they still have my back. I know they still care about me because they believe in me. They're telling me they believe in me.
Yeah, that's a very powerful thing. And self-doubt does more damage to success than failure ever does, right? So if you fail and you learn from it and you pick your socks up and you go again, no problem. But if you have self-doubt, you never started in the first place. You spoke about Gretzky before. You miss every shot that you don't take, right? So if you've got self-doubt and limiting belief, you don't take the shot in the first place. Yeah. You can always take the shot and you can fail and you can learn from it and grow. So, yeah, great one. a leader needs to invest in the belief of their team, make them believe in themselves, and then once they believe in themselves, they will knock it out of the park all the time. Probably the only boundary I would put on all of this, probably people thinking, oh, well, we're getting a bit crazy here. The only boundary I'd put on it is the values and beliefs of the team. So there might be some very clear rules of things that you will not do as a team, right? So we will not succeed at the expense of another human being. We will embrace diversity of thought. We'll have an inclusive environment where everyone feels that they belong. So having some values and beliefs that everyone in the team understands lays out the boundaries of the playing field, but then let the people play the game. Yeah. Let them go. Once they're on the playing field, let them go and let them shine.
In the last couple months, as part of the Impact Driven Leader, we have a book club. We have a roundtable. We go through discussions, and we were in the last couple months going through the book, The Vision Driven Leader by Michael Hyatt. In that book, he talks about vision and mission and identifies values. And in the conversation of that book, we talk about vision, how important it is, and identifying, asking the right questions. In a thought that one gentleman, his name is Josh, he shared and talked about. He works in a construction company, and VP of a construction company. He talks about, man, when we focus on the values, man, everything goes better. And I really have used that conversation to kind of tie into that last little piece that you're talking about, the vision, the values, and the beliefs. When we focus everything on our values, you fit in based upon our values, not your skill set, not where you went to school, not your previous experiences, not what you look like, not your hobbies. Do your values align? Great. If we can move past that, check that box, then the rest is actually pretty easy. And the great thing that we discussed as a group is when you focus on those values first, you'll be amazed at the diversity that you bring in. The different viewpoints, you have a totally different experience set, which is going to bring value to us because now we're going to see things so differently. And I come back to, again, what you were saying of where does this not fit? And I think this also goes to the next kind of step to maybe finish up here in our conversation is when that's not the case. When is that, when maybe there's a value disagreement or maybe they're not commonly held. Or say we're in a position and we're mid-level management, right? You talk about all the different things you discussed and you were talking about I had to change and I had to, go back and reassess how I led in this, office than what I did previously in order to, kind of foster up other leaders. Well, what if you were in a situation to where your superior was saying, what are you doing, Mick? That's not the way to do it. That's not the way to lead, or we don't do that here, even though well, if I don't, then I'm going to get burnout. I'm already seeing it. Or, man, I feel overwhelmed and now all of a sudden I have all this pressure on me and you just kind of sink lower in your chair as I am for those of you watching on video and you're like defeated. And I think that's this value alignment is the great resignation played out. Even though people aren't able to put their finger on it, that's what's happening. And I think all the different layers have an opportunity to raise their hand and say, hey, how are we addressing this?
Yeah, I think there's two layers of that, Tyler. So the first one is the values alignment, fully agree. And we need to have more conversations. We need to have leaders that are out there with the ability to articulate with clarity what their values and beliefs are. And then you will surround yourself with people that believe in the things that you believe, right? So that starts with the value alignment. The next one is congruence. And this is a killer, right? So if you are the leader and you've heard this podcast with this guy called Tyler and Mick, and they said that I should state my values. So I wrote a really nice values statement and I read it out to the team and I said, people first and this, and I told them all my values, but then my actions don't match those values. Then this is when trust completely disappears. And if you have a team that don't trust each other, then no, you're not heading anywhere significant anytime soon. So it's not just about stating your values, it's living those values and being congruent with those values at all time. And that's what people want in a leader. They want a leader that's open and transparent about their values, their belief, their vision, and then they want someone that lives by it, and particularly in times of pressure. So in those times of crisis where your back's against the wall, do you stick by your values, or do you start cutting corners around those values, and people pick up on it? So, talk about values alignment, and then values congruence, where your actions match those values. Yeah,
I think there's also a genuineness about that. Oh, yeah, this is my value. Oh, Mick, you're not living by it. Oh, you know what? You're right. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I wasn't.
Good one.
And being able to accept that, that's a place as one yourself. If you're looking at saying, I asked this conversation of a mentor, I said, how do you handle that situation? I'm just going to use you in this case, Mick. Mick, you say that one of your values is valuing people. And I see in an interaction, you're like, well, you don't treat Mary the same as what you treat, Elaine. And, there's a difference there. It's like, Elaine she's always, you're giving her the benefit of the doubt. Mary, it's a very short leash. And it's like, Mick, what's going on there? It's like you say that you're a person that values everyone, that they have their individual strengths, and yet I'm not seeing that. Is that something you're aware of? What am I missing? And I think the opportunity, as I laid that out, maybe a little bit clunky, but in this idea of that if you say your values are, or that in this case for this conversation, valuing every person, and I'm not seeing that, take the opportunity to say, hey, I believe you, I know you, and where am I missing it? Because I want to believe in you. I want to feel trusted and trusting, and it's on me. It's on me not being able to see it. It's not on you living it out, because that's what you say you do. I believe that. And it's me to say, hey, help me see what I don't see. And as that mentor expressed that upon me. What's amazing when you do that in organizations, and you do so with vulnerability and genuineness, how it leads to tremendous conversations to say, is either one, oh man, I didn't realize that, Mick. I didn't realize the different interactions. Thank you. Or you conversely saying, wow, Tyler, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I did not realize that. I didn't recognize it was that way. I appreciate that being the case, because that is affecting the team, because if you're seeing it, other people are seeing it too.
Yeah. So wonderful. I've got to tell you, every single person on this planet has got blind spots. Even you. Everyone listening to the show, everyone has got blind spots. So one of the greatest things that you can do is empower at least one person, if not the entire team, to show you what yours are. Right? Give them the psychological safety that if they see something that is incongruent to your values, to your leadership credo, if you like, that they can say, oh, Mick, not so sure about that. Can we have a chat about that? And give them the psychological safety where they can give you that feedback without fear of judgment, without fear of retribution, or at least give them the ability that the benefit that would come from giving you that feedback outweighs any fear that they have of the conversation. So, everyone has blind spots. Empower someone to show you what yours are.
I want to layer in this one last piece to go back to what you shared at the very beginning. Say you go to that circumstance, right? I come to you and say, hey, Mick, I ask you, and you bristle. And you kind of come back, or maybe you're upset with me or retaliatory. My role is not to be instructively obedient. It's to say, okay, is that a violation of my values? If it is, then you know what? This doesn't work. And I shouldn't show up every day and just instructively be obedient, because I'm not serving you as the leader. I'm not serving the other people at best when I'm thinking, hey, they're violating a value. I'm just going to do enough to get by here.
Yeah.
Do yourself and everyone else the benefit to fit out, to choose to say, you know what? These are values that I don't agree with, that I don't align with. There's some place out there that does, and I empower you, and I want to say, find that place, because you're going to be healthier, and your team is also going to be better off by doing those things, because the only way that change occurs is when tension is, relieved. Tension brings on change. And the only way that tension is relieved is through change. And if you keep thinking the status quo is going to keep it and it's just going to change someday, it won't. And maybe your action to say, hey, you know what? This is not the place for me actually makes it better for this story of Elaine and Mary because it brings about change. Don't know.
Yeah, brilliant, Tyler. And great things happen just outside your comfort zone. And you do need that little bit of tension to move you down the road. Otherwise, you're not going to just stay still. You're going to go backwards, as Tyler is alluding to, right? So that little bit of tension in a safe environment to push yourself and push your team. Absolutely, Tyler. Well said, sir.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, man, I'd love to kind of put a cap on this for your podcast, for the Impact Driven Leader podcast, to say, what are you most excited about being a catalyst of change in today, in this July of 2022? I'm not talking about the 5 years from now. That's you and I won't have hair. Let's just be honest. I'm cool with that. It's a lot easier to not have hair and shave my head. That's freaking free. I don't know, but when I look at that to say right now today, what's driving you to make a change for other leaders?
I'm going to give a short and a long-term answer to that. Wonderful question, by the way, Tyler. The short-term answer is I get great joy and fulfillment, personal joy and fulfillment, when I see a leader that I've worked with get comfortable in their skin and become the leader that they can become. And when they knock it out of the park and they've got a team that all of a sudden are full of joy and fulfillment, it brings me joy and fulfillment to watch that success. So the short term is one by one watching those leaders transform and become the best leader that they can become. It's like a renewable energy source for me that just keeps me going every day. But the ultimate goal is to get past this leadership crisis that we've got at the moment, where only 16 to 20% of people in the world truly love their job and like their boss. I want people to fall in love with their jobs again and fall in love with their workmates and to jump out of bed in the morning with purpose and intent, because they know that they're about to go to a workplace that has meaning and brings them joy, not it's Monday again, or getting to work on Monday morning and going, is it Friday yet? We've got a problem. We've got a problem that there's so many businesses like that. We're spending up to 1/3 of our lives in these workspaces. We deserve better. So the long-term goal is that everyone starts to fall in love with their jobs again, that they jump out of bed on Monday morning with purpose and intent, knowing that they're going to have a great time at work. They're going to feel proud on Friday when they're finished that they did something of substance, that they did something they can go back to their families and be proud. Oh, this is what I did this week. It was amazing. Right? So what happens now? People come home from work. How was work? What about it? How was work? It was amazing this week. We, and notice the word we, not I, did so many great things this week and we really made a difference. That's what I want for the world. All right, back to you, Tyler. I want to hear your answer to the same question.
Well, it comes back to our initial conversation and messages up until we had that, the alignment we have. And, very much the same in different words. And, my directive now and my excitement is, I shared earlier, I had to become healthy as a leader. I had to understand what that was, to recognize my insecurities, to find that empathy, that practicing actual empathy, putting my arms around people and walking with them, and retracting on some of my intensity in order to surround myself with people and feel empowered by that and empowering them and having value there. To understand that's a lot of what I think leaders deal with today. And it's my directive is to help other leaders get healthy too. In circumventing, not circumventing, but encircling what you're saying too, is if we have the day for our families and for all those around us, if we're more excited about the contribution we're making, then we have a bigger impact on our family and on our community and on our, outside of that to the world. And it comes from starting to identify what can I do as a leader, as a person. Every one of us is a leader because the person we're leading is ourselves. What are we doing to become healthier? To understand what are those barriers that, maybe cause a value misalignment. What are those things that, make me feel uneasy about being in a workplace or oh, why am I dreading this? Because I think when we start to unlock those things and we put our arms around other people, our community and our world gets smaller and smaller. And we start to realize it does not matter where we live in the world. We're all trying to do the same thing. And that is to, survive and serve and be a part of the world. And when we do that, man, we're all moving in the right direction. So that's kind of my passion and my directive. And I think so much aligned with what you said. And there's so many congruencies in, the topics and the conversations. But this is what I also understand. We're two people. And we're two people in a world of billions that are going through this situation. And that's where it doesn't take less of us to do more. It takes more of us that we can all do more.
Well, I've got to say, Tyler, if more leaders out there were listening to your show and everything I've heard from you today, we're going to make an impact on the world, because you're spot on in everything that you say. It's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you today. I've learnt something. We have common values and beliefs, the two and I, without any doubt. I learnt something from you today. It's something that I feel richer from this conversation, and I know that your audience is very lucky to have someone like you that's giving them the guardianship and giving them the ability to learn and look at leadership through a different lens. So thank you, Tyler. This has just been amazing. Thank you.
Well, Mick, right back at you. And, absolutely. And as I look at my page of notes that I have from this and, the different conversations piece and the framework and the organization by which that you help people. And I think that's paramount. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that structure and the research and the understanding and the implementation, because that's what's so impactful to move organizations is when people feel empowered and they have the tools. Man, that's when they can make the change. And when they can be inspired, but they don't have the tools, well, then they just go look for the next inspiration. So I appreciate you sharing all that. You're a master at it. You have a great resource in your book, all of your courses. I suggest everyone go check it out. And I appreciate you being a guest today, Mick. And I appreciate the opportunity to get to share with your audience as well. So thanks for this. And it's been an absolute joy and treat. And I can't wait till we talk again, man.
Brilliant, Tyler. Thank you so much. And for those listening to my show, I will be putting all of Tyler's details in the show notes as well, because I encourage you to get in contact with him. What a wonderful river of information that we have here in front of us with Tyler. Please connect with him and continue your own journey of learning what it truly means to be a leader in a modern world.
All right. Thank you, Mick. As I'm wrapping up and I'm sharing this outro from this conversation with Mick, one of the things that I kind of shared there at the very end about our community, about creating connections that I've realized, and I've seen this in my world, and I've seen this, I'm going to spotlight and discuss this for my son. My son Braxton is a soccer player. He plays in a pretty competitive league, and he plays with kids that are from all different schools. He doesn't have a teammate of 20 different kids on his team. He doesn't have a teammate that goes to school with him. In our community, what I found is that makes the community really small. Well, he's had the opportunity to play at higher levels where he's gone to play with kids from other cities. My younger son, Landon, he plays with 3 or 4 kids from his school. He plays with a handful of other kids from other schools on his basketball team. And there's a difference there. And what I find is the difference is how small the community is. With my son Braxton, his soccer world, his community, his connections, his texting with friends that play throughout the country is different than my son Landon, whose focus is on just the kids close to him. Why do I share that? Because I know this walking away from this conversation with Mick. My leadership world has gotten smaller. The connection that he and I have made, the ability to share and say, how can we support each other on the cause that we both have? Because they're so well aligned. I encourage you to do the same. Find people that are aligned in the opportunity to grow in the space that you're in. If you're listening to this podcast, then you have some interest in leadership. And I'm excited about that because I see a great need, as Mick shared, to empower and support and equip leaders emerging leaders, existing leaders, experienced leaders in our world today to say, what does it look like to lead in 2022 and beyond? And I'm excited for that opportunity to be a little bit closer. I want to invite you to be a member of the Impact Driven Leader Roundtable. I talked about it at the intro. I'm going to talk about it here again. The opportunity that you have to be on a weekly Zoom where we read through a book. We go through leadership 101 right there in our face. It's not just 101, but it is dealing and working through leadership and real life examples, what you're working with. But it's not just me individually coaching you. You're making the world smaller by you're bringing in other leaders that are in other circumstances, other walks of life. Man, and the perspective they share is absolutely outstanding. As well, be a part of our Impact Driven Leader Book Club. Be prompted each day to, as we read through those books, with questions and daily thoughts of what is it, what information, what teaching are you taking from these books? Take these books and go a little bit deeper. As well, thanks for just being a subscriber. I say just, but thank you for being a subscriber to this community, supporting the community, the Impact Driven Leader. I've had a tremendous amount of fun interviewing everyone, and because you listen, that's what makes it possible. So thanks again. I hope you got tremendous value out of today's episode. Make sure, check out the show notes wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. You're going to have all those little links there to go check out Mick, to check out his book, You're a Leader, Now What, and everything, all the courses he has. I encourage you to go check it out. Hopefully learn a little bit and make your world a little bit smaller too. Thanks for listening in. Hope you have a great, wonderful day.